Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Friday, the 22nd of June, 2012. I'm Jim Nintzel, host of Political Roundtable, our weekly analysis and commentary on local, state, and national politics. Tonight on the Roundtable, we'll discuss the latest poll in the U.S. Senate race and talk about why some Democrats are already unhappy with new Congressman Ron Barber. We'll also examine the fast and furious gun walking scandal that has led to contempt of Congress charges for Attorney General Eric Holder. Joining me this evening is Democratic Party Chairman Jeff Rogers and Republican Party Chairwoman Carolyn Cox. Welcome to both of you, and thanks for being here. Carolyn, this situation in Washington with these contempt of Congress charges against Eric Holder over this gun walking scandal, the fast and furious gun scandal that started right here in southern Arizona and led to, I think, 2,000 guns or more moving into Mexico during an ATF investigation. And one of those guns was recovered from the scene of a slain Border Patrol agent, Brian Terry.
Right. And, you know, I think it's a real tragedy. Brian Terry certainly was killed, and I'm sure there were a number of people in Mexico who were killed for the same incident. And I think that what President Obama is doing is wrong by using an executive order to keep the information from coming forward. And I think it's really up to the news media to probe and get that information out, because you certainly would if it were a Republican president.
And Jeff, this Fast and Furious scandal was certainly not a good move for the Obama administration.
Let's put it in perspective. This started with ATF in 2006. It was a foolish idea. I don't know who came up with this harebrained scheme, but they obviously didn't learn from the first time they did it, because they did it again in 2007. And they recovered very few weapons from it. It was it just didn't work. Unbeknownst to anyone in the Obama administration, the ATF did it again in 2009, and that's when they ended up and found later a gun. Actually, two weapons were automatic rifles were found at the Terry killing. So you know, it's a crazy idea. It was a stupid idea, and the people who are responsible for it, some of them have been held accountable. But this is a manufactured crisis here for the Republicans, and you have to realize that many of the things that they're demanding through their subpoenas have been produced. Many of the other things that they're demanding in the subpoenas cannot be produced legally. For instance, grand jury transcripts can't be produced without an order of a judge and a showing of substantial need in a court of law. The internal memorandum of the prosecutors on pending cases cannot be disclosed. Wiretaps cannot be disclosed without court orders in that given case. And many of these regard pending cases that are still in the investigative stages. None of that can be turned over to Congress, and so the president stepped in and did what he should and said, "This is I'm exercising executive privilege here." So this is an absolutely ridiculous so-called scandal going on right now, and it's at the hands of a man who in 2010, when he realized he would chair this committee, said, "I will wear down that White House with nothing but investigations." Congressman Issa, who's formerly from Ohio, where if the justice system worked properly, he'd be in prison right now for arson and the multiple vehicle thefts that he committed. So this is not a guy who stands in very high regard to very many people in America. So I think this is just an outrage, and some people have speculated that it's sort of revenge for the Attorney General's upholding the Voting Rights Act by going after the voter suppression tactics of Republicans in various states like Florida and Ohio that ought to be battleground states.
Oh, Carolyn, that was quite a stirring defense of the administration there. I'm sure you want to respond there, and I just would ask you, do you expect the full House of Representatives is going to hold the Attorney General in contempt?
I think they will, yes, because I think he is.
And would you like to respond to anything Jeff had to say?
No, that was a wonderful story.
Okay. Jeff, do you think this will lead to a constitutional crisis where the U.S. Supreme Court will have to end up weighing in about what gets released here?
I don't think so, because we've been down this road a couple times before, and what is likely to happen is the law says then that the Attorney General must then go to a grand jury in the Washington, D.C. area and to seek an indictment. Well, that's not going to happen with the Attorney General doing that, and all they have to do is delay it a little bit of time, and then the subpoenas all expire at the end of this Congress. So I don't foresee anything. It's going to fizzle out one way or another. Because ISA and because the NRA has made this a litmus test, actually, the NRA has now got involved, and they're making it a litmus test on how they're going to grade congresspersons for the next election cycle, and you won't get a 100% rating from the NRA if you don't vote to with ISA and his committee on the contempt charge. So, it's all politics.
Well, immigration politics have been a big deal in the last couple of weeks with a lot of different areas, and one of them was the president's directive last week about that he would no longer seek to deport children who were brought here by their parents and without proper documentation. And Mitt Romney yesterday said that he felt as though the president was doing this as a last-minute thing. He should have done it sooner, and that he would have a different solution, but he didn't really reveal what that solution was. And Jeff, how do you think this is playing out?
Well, I think it's playing out very well for the president. A lot of people said it was only for political reasons. I'd like to think it was for more than that, but the political part of it is playing out quite well for him. It's certainly going to help energize the Latino vote in battleground states such as Arizona's turning into a battleground state as we speak. So I think it's going to help there, and it puts Romney in a difficult position because just like when Obama came out in favor of gay marriage, both of these times it's put him in a position: is he going to pander to his base of the extreme right wings of the Republican Party, or is he going to take something down the middle that the mainstream of America really believes in? And you could see that the polls that were taken after this showed that Americans approved of it. Even the polls before he did it here in Arizona, even Republicans by 59% approved of the DREAM Act, and over 75% of Arizonans approve of the DREAM Act. So this is something that I think is very, very popular across America and is seen as just a rational way to deal with these people who've done nothing wrong in their own right.
And Carolyn, let's hear from you on this.
If I could jump in here for just a moment, and I'm quoting Charles Krautheimer, he said, with respect to the notion, talking about Obama, that I can just suspend deportations of immigrants brought here illegally as children through executive order, that's just not the case, because there are laws on the books that Congress has passed. Now, President Obama said that in March of 2011. And now, all of a sudden, those laws still remain on the books. Only now he thinks that that he has the right to do this. So I would again say the process. It just seems like that he is unwilling to work with the Congress to try to get things through Congress. And he had years to do that. The first 2 years after he was elected, he had the House and the Senate. If this were such a terribly important thing, he could have done that when he first got into office.
And that was the argument that Mitt Romney was making this week.
Right, which it takes a lot of chutzpah to make those kind of remarks when he knows, he's smart enough to know that the Republicans blocked it. I mean, it was passed through the House in 2010, and then it went to the Senate, and the Republicans filibustered it. There were enough votes to pass it in the Senate, the DREAM Act, but the Republicans filibustered it. So, the situation we have right now is that the Republicans absolutely will block any attempt at any kind of comprehensive immigration policy. And
do you remember how we got Obamacare? Do you remember that there was not one Republican permitted to do anything, and everything was all pushed through by the Democrats? So, it kind of works both ways, but I think that it is very improper for Obama to, when he actually admitted in 2011 that it was not legal for him to do this through executive order, and then he just comes back in 2012 and does it because that's what he thinks is politically expedient.
As the president and as the executive branch, they can choose who to prosecute, when to prosecute, and what to prosecute.
And
they have a great deal. They have a great deal of leeway.
Which ones they don't.
As to which ones they want to enforce and to what degree they want to enforce them. And the Obama administration has taken the policy for quite a long time here that they're going to focus their immigration deportations on people who have criminal records and are a threat to our society. And these young men and women who have done nothing wrong are certainly no threat to our society. And this,
but
I
that
applaud
is
them for doing
exactly
this.
opposite to what he himself said in 2011.
And let's step away from the process argument for a moment and look at the political argument, which is the question of how Latinos are responding to both Democrats and Republicans, and they certainly seem to be leaning more towards Democrats these days. Do Republicans have a problem in attracting the Latino vote right now?
Well, I just still think that you have to follow the laws. We should be a country of laws, not a country of men. And so if we are just going to make up this stuff as we go along, it's a real problem to all of those people who have come in appropriately, who have waited the appropriate time, taken the exams, made their commitment to the United States of America. And this man wants to just simply step around that process. If you talk to Gabrielle Salcedo Mercer, she will tell you that, she came here illegally, and that's the way she believes people should come.
And this does not put them on a path to citizenship at all. It just defers any kind of action on their immigration status for it. And the next president can change that with a stroke of the pen, and I suspect that's what President Romney would do, although he has certainly tried to keep from being pinned down on what he would do. He gave only vague notions of what he might do as president when it comes to immigration yesterday.
All right. While we're talking about immigration, Ron Barber, the Democrat who was just elected to Congress, took his first vote on an immigration bill and actually crossed party lines, voted with Republicans on this bill, which would waive environmental laws around within 100 miles of the border, I believe. And Carolyn, what did you think of Mr. Barber's vote?
Well, actually, his vote was correct because for years, our Border Patrol has been stuck with this silly rule because it's on, federal land that they could not go after people who were crossing the border except on foot or horseback, whereas the other people could be running or in a vehicle or whatever. So I think it's absolutely the most appropriate thing if we intend to enforce the laws of closing our border and having people come in the appropriate manner.
And Jeff, I've seen response from Democrats who are very unhappy with Ron Barber crossing party lines, voting in favor of this. Is this suddenly going to give the Matt Hines, his Democratic primary opponent, some room to maneuver here?
I don't think it favors Matt Hines in any way. I'm not so sure Matt's any more moderate than less moderate than Ron Barber. Ron Barber assured everyone when he came in, I will be crossing the aisle. I'm a moderate Democrat. I'm realistic and pragmatic about Southern Arizona, and he talked a lot about the border. So he's not doing anything that really shocks or surprised those of us who've known him. It's not how I would have voted. I just don't believe in waiving environmental regulations when it comes to these kinds of things. We've got some rather pristine, wonderful places along the border that we need to as carefully protect as we can. And I know that migrants crossing there sometimes do damage to it, but we don't need to make that worse and exacerbate the problem. Now, but there is a little bit of pushback from some people. Some of our more progressive, more liberal people who would have preferred that he voted the other way on this. It's a meaningless vote in a way because the president has said he won't sign a bill that contains this language, and the Senate has already indicated that they'll strip this language from the bill. So it's not going to be there in the end, but it was certainly a symbolic first vote for Ron.
I would just like to comment that if his radical environmentalists would like to go down there and walk around and watch where the crossers come across, they would be appalled at the damage that is being done to the surrounding territory. And if you don't believe me, Zach Taylor, the chairman of Santa Cruz County, can show you. He's taken video of it, and it is absolutely devastating what they've done and the cruelty that they actually perpetrate on the women that they bring across the border with them. So I think it would be great if the Border Patrol were able to actually patrol that part of the border in a vehicle.
Certainly something that Leo Banks has written about a lot in the pages of the Tucson Weekly as well. As long as we're talking about the CD2 race, we had an interesting situation in that this week. And on the Republican side, Martha McSally had to let her spokesperson go. Sam Stone resigned from the campaign this week. Sam has been on this program a number of times in your seat and has talked on the Republican side of things, but did not return a phone call from me this week. But he apparently leaked some information to the Barber campaign in the final days of the special election and gave them some advice, and that has led back to these stories that I've been hearing for some time, that Martha McSally was undermining Jesse Kelly's efforts because she wanted to run in the fall for this seat. And what's your take on what's going on here, Carolyn?
Well, a lot of this is he says, she says, but Martha did make the decision that she felt like that Sam had sort of a lapse of judgment there in this one particular case, and that she had, although she respects him tremendously and feels that he was really responsible for her doing as well as she did in the primary, that it was no longer appropriate for him to be on her campaign. So she has made that decision. I have also, however, seen the emails that she had sent to Jesse throughout after the election, offering to come and, be a part of any of his events and that kind of thing. And she did not get a response back. So it may have looked like she was not supporting Jesse, but it was by his decision that he was not asking her to come, or, saying, yeah, sure, come to the events.
So you don't think she's going to have a problem winning back over any kind of Jesse's supporters in this race?
I think the supporters will, once they understand all of these things, will be quite happy, because Martha understands that the things that we have to do is we have to get our economy going, and you have to grow the economy in order to create jobs. I think that she is very much in tune with what has to happen, and it's the uncertainty that we have out there now. We don't know if the taxes are going to be raised. We don't know if Obamacare is going to basically put a lot of small businesses out of business because it is so very expensive to do. There are lots and lots of uncertainties, and it's what's holding this economy back. Okay. And she understands all of that, and I think I told you when we first talked that we had 4 good candidates, and I still believe she's a good candidate.
And we've got another poll in the U.S. Senate race that shows a tight race between Richard Carmona and Jeff Flake, if Jeff Flake is indeed the nominee, and he does have a tough primary ahead of him yet. Jeff, this week, the Carmona campaign brought Al Frank into town. Actually, I think did a half dozen fundraisers with him between here and Phoenix. What can we expect next from the Carmona campaign in this race?
Well, first off, as to the poll, I really like this poll because it oversampled Republicans by 12 points. And so you should oversample Republicans somewhat in a state like this where they have more voters and have a higher turnout percentage usually than Democrats, but that's way too much. So it probably understates how close this race really, really is. I think that you're going to see the Carmona campaign, well, they're already on the ground everywhere in the state. Dr. Carmona is spending more time in Maricopa County because getting his name out there is really what matters in this state, because the people who know him, and if you drill down on all the polling results in this one and a previous poll, the people who knew of him and knew about him supported him over Flake by a wide margin. So I think that you're going to see more and more of that as his name gets known and as people find out who he is, what he's done, and his extraordinary life and accomplishments. The other thing that's getting fascinating about this race is Cardin. I have friends at Phoenix who tell me you cannot turn on television without seeing a Cardin ad attacking Flake. And in the latest polling of Cardin and Flake, he's made up 20 percentage points in just a very short time of a couple of months. So
that's going from like single digits to 20-some. So
yeah,
he's still got a long ways to go to really close the gap.
And he's got a lot more money that he can spend to do it. So he's taking some. I think Flake is taking on water in huge quantities right now and sinking very fast. You've also got to realize that when Cardin criticized him for not having enough private sector experience, he then bragged about his lobbying for a African firm that was partially owned by an Iranian company. So he's really in digging himself a hole, and I think Cardin's providing him a shovel. So that race, I wouldn't be surprised to see that race get very close.
And this is Will Cardin is spending a lot of money, and now the Club for Growth has come in and they've said they're going to increase their spending on their ads that are targeting Will Cardin, saying that he's an imposter, he's not a real conservative, and Will Cardin's running these ads trying to set himself up as the real conservative and saying that Jeff Flake isn't a real conservative, mostly on immigration issues because Flake has in the past supported things like the DREAM Act. What's your sense of where this primary is at this point?
Well, before we get to the primary, I would just like to say this about Carmona. Remember, he's been everything over his career. He's been a Democrat, an independent. He's even worked as a Surgeon General under George W. Bush. So, he's kind of an interesting character, but certainly well known in Tucson. So no question about that. As far as between Flake and Cardin, I think that they're going to fight this out for a while.
Yeah, it does seem as though it's going to be a tough race. You expect the SB 1070 decision coming up?
It'll either be Monday or Thursday. Those are the only two options, the way the court has announced its calendar for next week. So they've got a lot of big decisions to get out next week.
And any predictions on SB 1070 for next week?
It is the law, so I assume that they will uphold it.
Okay. Backers of a sales tax proposition may have a problem. It's an effort to extend the 1 cent temporary sales tax into a permanent status for the state, but they appear to have made a paperwork error. They turned in the proper language on a disc, but the actual hard copy was missing a few lines. Jeff, what's your take on this?
Well, if Ken Bennett will probably take a break from his birtherism stuff to try to get some publicity out of this and try to reject the petitions, but the group is prepared to file a lawsuit immediately to force him to accept the petitions. The law is that you must substantially comply with the process, and I believe they probably have. Former Chief Justice Stanley Feldman will be representing them in that action, and I fully foresee that Ken Bennett will be forced to put this on the ballot.
And I just don't think so, because if you are signing a petition, you read it, and you know what it is you're signing and what you're committing to. And I think that we don't. I mean, if we don't follow the laws, then why would anybody, follow when they're doing a petition? It kind of goes back to the city council race, where they're putting huge fines on Jennifer Rawson, and because of minor errors that she made. And now, so in this case, when it's in your favor, Jeff, you're saying that we ought to overlook the laws and just do whatever you want to.
Here's the facts. The correct language was on each petition. So if the person did read it, that's what they were certifying they did. And they gave a disc with that same language, because it was requested by Ken Bennett, to them, and then they had a separate hard copy that they filed with them that got stamped in that had slightly different language on it. So the actual petition that people signed was correct, and it is the correct one. So the question is the difference between the one on the disc, which was the correct one, and the hard copy, which was slightly different. Is that enough to disqualify it? And I think that it's not going to be held to be. Now, it'll go rapidly to the Supreme Court to decide, because these kinds of decisions on voting issues go directly from the trial court to the Supreme Court, skipping the Court of Appeals.
Speaking of following rules, do you think we should have any concern about Mr. Dupnik referring in his campaign site, referring people to the sheriff's office, which you're not supposed to do?
I haven't seen anything like that. I'm sure that he's following the rules. He's been doing this for, 50-some years, and I'm a little bit more biased than most people, because when I moved here in 1979, he was my first boss. So, of course, he was at the top of the chain of command. I was at the bottom. But, I haven't looked at his website, and so I'd be happy to look at that and give you a legal opinion next week.
All right. Sounds good.
And Jeff mentioned earlier the Ken Bennett once again getting caught up in the birther controversy this week. He in a talk in front of some Republicans, he said that he does believe the president was born in Hawaii, but that he was fibbing when it came time to apply for college, and that's where he began talking about this business with Kenya. What did you think of the president's comments? The Secretary of State's comments.
I mean, but we may have a problem with all of this because Obama is not willing to release any of the documents that have to do, like his application to college or anything like that. So there's really no way to prove whether he did do that or not. And so people are very concerned. You really don't like the President of the United States to be telling untruths. And we've had a number of presidents who've gotten a lot of trouble for doing things like that. And so I understand, I think I told you a couple of weeks ago, you asked me if I thought he was born in the States, and I said he was probably born in Hawaii.
Right.
Well, on the one hand, this is pretty laughable, but on the other hand, you hear me on here constantly talking about the good old days when there were some moderate Republicans who, seemed like they weren't crazy. And I thought Ken Bennett was one of those for a long time, but something just happened to this guy in the last 6 months or so. First, he says the president wasn't born in Hawaii, and he's going to demand proof of that. And then now he's caught on tape at a legislative district meeting talking about, well, I guess maybe he was born in America, but he lied when he applied to Occidental College and used his wife's or his mother's or what would have been a stepfather in Indonesia at the time, used that last name instead of his other name. Well, quite a bit has been released from Occidental College, including yearbooks and other things where he's identified as either Barry or Barack Obama, and not by the name suggested by Ken Bennett and some of these other, I guess we'll call them the neo-birthers. But, this is just craziness. And the fact that people are willing to entertain such crazy ideas and say them out loud really ought to disqualify them for public office completely in the voters' minds. The fact is that Ken Bennett ought to be not even considered a viable candidate for governor.
Have you seen any of his college application forms? Do you know
I've
if he
seen
applied
yearbooks and things like that.
But you don't know if he applied as a foreign student or how he applied?
Why would he apply as a foreign student? There's no advantage to be gained from applying as a foreign student. I mean, this mythology that right-wing websites propagate is just it's unbelievable. It's laughable and hilarious on the one hand, but it just shows you how they want to make sure that people believe this president is somehow not a viable president.
But you have not seen his college records, right?
I don't need to see his college records. You haven't seen my college records, and no one disputes that I was born in Indiana.
All right. About 15 seconds left, Carolyn. Supreme Court going to uphold Obamacare?
I think not, because I think it is not constitutional.
10 seconds left, Jeff.
I think they've shown this court to be nothing but a political body. I don't think they'll follow the law or the Constitution, and I think they'll at least throw out the what is constitutional, and that's the mandate.
All right, that's what we'll be talking about next week. All the time we have for tonight. You can learn more about what's happening in politics by visiting azpm.org/yourvote. And while you're on our website, we'd love to hear your thoughts about tonight's programs, so be sure to leave us a comment. And to find out the latest from AZPM, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Stay tuned next for the News Hour, and then at 8:30, tune into Arizona Week for an in-depth look at the Latino politics as the U.S. Supreme Court prepares to rule on the future of Arizona's controversial immigration law. Next week on Arizona Illustrated, we'll look at reaction to the Supreme Court's ruling on SB 1070. Finally, on behalf of the Roundtable, I'd like to wish the Arizona Wildcats the best of luck in their quest for a World Series championship. I'm Jim Nintzel. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.